Sure. Right. Yeah, Shweta, what you said, I'm totally excited. So, good evening, all of you, and a warm welcome for the Fireside Chat Break the Bias. Let me introduce our speakers first, and let me start with Suparna Bhattacharya. Suparna Bhattacharya is a distinguished technologist in AI research lab at HP Labs, with a current focus on data-centric trustworthy AI and a passion for realizing innovations that blend insights from diverse computing domains. She holds a B.Tech degree from IIT Kharagpur 1993 and a late in life PhD from Indian Institute of Science 2013, with a deep experience in several areas of system software development and research. This includes several enjoyable years of open source contributions to Linux kernel, 28 granted patents, and 12 more pending. So 28 peer-reviewed publications and a book on resource proportional software design for emerging systems. Suparna is an IEEE Fellow and a Fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering and has served regularly on program committees for top-tier conferences in computer science. Welcome, Suparna, and happy to have you here. Next, let me
Thank you, Divya.
introduce. Thank you. Let me introduce Lakshmi Gayatri. Lakshmi Gayatri is a senior manager working with R&D VMware. She's a passionate leader with deep knowledge on Kubernetes and cloud native apps. She's an open source enthusiast and leads a team of contributors who develop operators to make vSphere the best platform to run any Kubernetes distro. She has done several webinars and presentations internally and externally on modern applications, containers, and Kubernetes. She also interacts with customers and an active speaker for VMUG Bangalore and Mumbai. She is a vExpert and won Tech Evangelist Award by VMware. She was recognized as the Techinist for the Women's History Month in March 21. She is a track chair for GHCI and a Women Who Code leader for Bangalore chapter. She is an eminent judge and mentor for Smart India Hackathon, which is run by Government of India. Welcome, NG, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Divya, for your kind introduction. So let's get started. Shweta, do you want somebody to even give us a quick intro about the Women Who Code?
LT, I think the participants are aware. Still, I can do a little bit of info on what is coming next. So Women Who Code, as many of you are aware, it's a non-profit organization based out of SFO, and we have about 290,000 members across the globe and based in about 130 plus countries. And Bangalore in India being the most active chapter. In India, we have about 14,000 plus members, of which about 7,500 is coming from Bangalore. That is the kind of impact that we have been making for especially the women in the community. And our vision is to ensure that we help the women to grow in their technical ladder and see more women picking up the C-suite roles going forward. So with that vision, we have two eminent speakers here who have done lots in the industry, and I'm getting excited. So over to you, LG.
Thanks, thanks, Shweta. Okay, so let's get started. Suparna, first, I'm going to start with you. So the theme of the International Women's Day is Break the Bias. And then I would like to congratulate you for the recent award, which you have won with HP. Can you please tell us a little more about it?
Thank you, Lakshmi, and it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me for this session. So the award that you're talking about is this is the HP Women's Excellence Award. I guess that's the one that you're mentioning. So yeah, I think this came as a surprise to me. So it's mostly a nomination by my colleagues, by manager. I had won that about 5 years back, and it was kind of the second time. I think this was related to some work that I'm kind of doing right now related to a project which is PAN organization within HPE, looking at how you can, in the area of data-centric AI and how you get good data for AI, and it's kind of the theme around that. But it was related to possibly this kind of PAN HPE initiative that we've been trying to drive, an innovation that we've been trying to drive for a while. And it's also been, I think, a kind of a sequence of things where I've been fortunate last couple of years or so. A lot of different awards come my way, as the IEEE Women Technologists of the Year award in India Council. There was the Zinov Award a few years back. Then there was the one from IAC, my alma mater, and then there was the INAE and IEEE Fellowship. So all of this kind of have happened in the last few years, and this is, of course, it's very encouraging. But I think it's also, to me, it's a signal of the support that's there in both within my organization and many of the colleagues and people I work with across the world. And I think these things are also kind of a culmination of a lot of different initiatives, collaborations that I've done. It's not just supporting me for the award, but I think it's supporting in the work that we have done and helping that come to that level of impact.
So it's also, does it motivate you even more, Suparna?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing about this award, that they make you feel very responsible, right? to live up to them. And it's kind of inspiring to say, because many of the pieces of work that results in these things, they take years, some of them take decades to have an impact. So it's kind of motivating to feel that, maybe the things that I'm trying today, the things that I'm working on now, I may not know whether they will work out. There's a lot of uncertainty, but it inspires me to keep going, because maybe someday, like when I was working on Linux, I could never anticipate the huge impact it would have over the years. Maybe something similar could be going on with the work that I'm doing now. So yes, it does.
That's very interesting. Actually, usually we are so used to seeing short-term returns. And then the moment you know that there is something which will pay back to you much longer, being consistent and then still investing in that is going to be a challenge. Most often I had seen that people kind of withdraw when they don't see returns coming in any soon. But probably you'll have to share us some tips on how do you keep it consistent.
Yes, I mean, so let's talk about it as we go. But so Lakshmi, tell us more about how you're enjoying your role as a manager now, after being a technologist for several years, right?
Yeah, I would say little less than 2 decades, I should say that, Suparna. So it's been just an year that I have taken up the manager role. So almost for the entire part of my career, I was an engineer, a developer, and I had played a role of a tester, customer advocate, and all that. So very close to technology. But since last year, I moved into management, but I'm enjoying it. I'm learning a lot of things, I would say, not just as a technologist, sometimes my work would be related only to me, and then maybe a little part of my team or some stakeholders. But the role what I have taken now, it is cutting across like many functions, and I'm also learning a lot of new things. Like my recent pick is telco, which I had never worked into. So I'm starting learning about what is telco, what is 5G. So it feels like I'm still continuing as an engineer at heart, by manager by designation.
Yeah. And because you have been an engineer for so long, you understand engineers, and you understand that impact, and you understand that work. So you're able to really relate and help that have that bigger impact, right? I mean, I've always seen that value in a lot of the managers I have worked with in my career.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Because even I felt that when my manager understands the problem, what I'm sharing, not just verbally, but then get into the depth and width of it, I feel like I'm getting more support. I feel like somebody has my back. So I have something like a fail-safe model. So that we give a psychological safe teams then. Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Suparna, for touching upon my stuff as well. Suparna, and in your introduction, we heard about your patents, your publications, your book, and all these, and so many things you have done. I think we'll have to next time rework on your introduction to include all these things as well. So what would be your success mantra? I mean, I had seen you since maybe a decade ago, when you had come in as a speaker for Grace Hopper conference, maybe 2011 or 2012. So from that time, I got hooked to you. And at that time, you were with IBM.
Yeah.
You were with IBM and then you're pursuing PhD. And so I had been following you from that time, like what you had been doing, how much of the work it's happening from your individual capacity and also at the organization level. Would you share some tips for us to have more of an innovators in our careers?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I'm still learning, but I think there are many different kinds of. If I look back at my career, first 7 years of my career, I didn't have any patents. I didn't know. It's not that I didn't do innovative work. I think I just didn't know how to recognize an innovation. I didn't even know that this is possible. Right? So I think that's the first thing, to know that that's possible, because first of all, I think as we are doing our technical work, every time we run into a problem, we try to solve that problem. And that's kind of how my first patent happened. So it was a problem with working on distributed file systems and trying to do a filter file system on top of it. And we are running into issues where we're not even able to filter. And then suddenly we realize that it's because the server was authoritatively caching things. And so that's why it was not intercepting. And with that problem, kind of now solving that problem actually led to an invention. That was my first patent. So sometimes it's just the work that you're doing and recognizing when that is an invention. I could do that then, because the distinguished engineer I was working in IBM at that time, Dr. Indapal Naran, so he told me, he said, I see a patent here. Once he said that, it was easy, you start to think about it, you expand that scope. So that's one kind of thing that, then that trajectory starts as you're doing your work, you keep noticing that. Another kind of thing that I found is sometimes that it always often helps when I'm switching areas. When I was working on, say, on filter file systems, and then on Linux, I started working on dynamic probes, or what you call RAS kind of interception capabilities there, and I started applying the ideas. It just so happened, I find that when I go to a different area, you look at things in a fresh way compared to others in that area. Sometimes I have found that the reason I did my PhD, for example, was even so that was one series of patents. So the reason I did my PhD was I was feeling that I was kind of plateauing, that I'm not getting as much new, fresh ideas. I was trying to figure out, okay, Linux has caught up now. What can we do next? And that's when I found this. I was working with the IBM Academy of Technology, and I was working with communities of people. So I was getting exposed to a lot of cross-sectional ideas. And then my PhD topic in that way was intersectional. So I was trying to look at energy efficiency. And so I started looking at it at a cross-stack layer. I started understanding what problems the application frameworks face. I started learning about some machine learning techniques, started learning about program analysis techniques. So being exposed to that intersection, again, generates a spike of ideas. Sometimes the intersection comes by working ourselves, and sometimes it just comes from conversations with people from different areas. And that is another thing that triggered ideas. Another jump for me happened was when I started looking at AI and this. So I was always a system software person, and I used to look at the kernel, and I said the PhD work was a little more, I started looking upwards and and I was looking at it in a fresh way from other people, because I came from a systems background, because they were also working on the same challenges, but they were looking at it in a different way, and I got a different angle to it. I felt that when I started working on AI as well. So because I was trying to look at how AI, how could storage systems. So, this is my early work in HP, and maybe some of the prior work also in IBM research was how could storage systems, memory systems, system software, how could it help these analytics and AI workloads? And I realized that everybody was looking at it in terms of speeds and feeds. Yes, you need a lot of computation, you need a lot of data processing, and that's how maybe most people were looking at it. But I was looking at it from that point of view, saying, okay, but what's the key thing that I need to optimize for? What does it really mean to do caching in the context of AI? I don't need to cache frequently or recently used data. I need to cache data that's most insightful. What is the most insight rich data? Can I learn about what the AI workloads are actually doing? Can as AI workloads are they running, can they train the system And that's kind of how this whole area of meaning aware storage, so this is slowly what I found is that you can start to carve out a whole area of innovation. And then as you start to pursue these threads, more and more patents start to come. And that's kind of the situation right now also for the work that I'm doing currently, which is the work that you were talking about, which is this area of data-centric trustworthy AI. So as I was looking at AI, for example, and saying, so this was from a systems perspective. So I was still after, how do I make the workloads run better? How do I make it run more efficiently? And we had a bunch of optimizations there saying, can we learn, can we actually learn what the workloads are doing? The application is doing in a much deeper sense, understand that and optimize it. But then people keep saying that the problem in AI is not just efficiency issues. The problem is that how do you actually get it to give you good quality results? And so the problem, the Achilles heel for AI is often data. If you don't give it good data in the first place, and that's where, so this comes to that, last part of the challenge, which, aspect of innovation, which I got, tip I got from a mentor long back, that if you want to innovate, you want to seek good problems, dig in the messiest areas, dig in the areas where there is a lot of complexity, people are complaining, screaming at each other, maybe, you're tired, it's tedious, right? That means that we haven't cracked that problem. And so that is a lot of opportunity. If you just do something there, it can have a huge impact. And so this was, this for me was that another cue that this is the problem. A lot of people are working on optimizing models, neural architecture search, many cool things, but all iterating on that same data. But when in practice, people who are working in that area, they always know that if I get the better data, if I get good data, then the whole thing actually, the results are, there's a significant impact, but there's no systematic way to do that. And so that kind of led me to this area of saying, okay, can we have foundations for data-centric and trustworthy AI? How do we do that? And that's what led me to this new area of innovation. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. It's different things at different parts of the career.
Yeah, I really liked when you said you actually went hunting for problems, what needs to be solved. And that was through either by working on it, doing your PhD, or talking with mentors, having some simple conversations, identifying this messy, complicated areas which still remain unchanged. And then at some places, what I had also seen is the bits and pieces are all solved. But when you put all the things together, it still has the same complexity as it had ever. So the solution, the part solutions never are the solution for the entire problem. So there is a good set of innovation. And yeah, thanks for, most often I feel that we have to do PhD, but then the thought which came to you that you felt that you were hitting a plateau and then you were not getting your ideas, and then you picked up doing a PhD so that, the fresh stream of thoughts come in. And then you're
so
going
one
to
of the
have
things, of course,
base.
that barrier you run into. So this is a barrier I ran into, is fresh stream of thoughts, but then you don't know how to execute them. You don't know how to take it forward because I'm going into a new area. And so that happened during my PhD, that happened later on. And this is where I found that collaborations with other people who are experts in that area really helped. So, having an idea to actually turning it into something that's a realized innovation takes a lot of work. It takes expertise. And I found that having close collaborations, I found that the program analysis community thinks and works very differently from our systems community. And even the systems community, maybe the architecture and modeling folks work very differently from how the system software people work. The machine learning community has a very different language. And they work differently. So by having these collaborations with different areas of people of experts, and learning from them, right? So because it's very easy, often as a systems person, we would say, okay, applications are bloated, that's the problem, they have coded it badly. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that the frameworks that were there that is supposed to help them have this side effect. So it's not their problem. It's a fault of how the stack has actually ended up being designed, and maybe we can tackle that problem. So that those conversations and insights are what I often found very helpful.
Yeah, interacting with diverse teams who are coming from different expertise areas. That is very good. And yeah, so I think we have quite a bit of notes which we were recording when you were speaking, but definitely So one takeaway which I see is the moment you know that you're not solving enough or you're not identifying problem, I think that is where we'll have to look at another technology area which is adjacent to it. Or it could be something like for you, you should totally shift it into AI, which was a very new field, which was not something as a system software engineer you were working on. So picking up a new area also will be good to keep us going on the technology front. And yeah, Suparna, I'll follow up on with another question. So when you were trying to innovate and you were having your patents ready, did you feel that there was a pushback, or you were not be able to make some progress which you intended to?
So, so I often say this, that innovation is hard, right? I think the incremental things are easier to do. As I said, you run into a problem, you figure out a way to solve that. It's all, this is earlier in the career that's helpful, right? Because you have problems defined for you, and somebody else has taken the risk of deciding that problem was an important one, and your job is to go crack it. But as you go higher in the career, you have this responsibility of, as I say, opening up new problems, opening up new opportunities, understanding whether that will have a value or not. And you're doing it in the midst of all of this uncertainty. So I feel like when I'm saying these broader areas, like these messy, complicated areas that I'm talking about, if you dig, you find a lot of opportunities there. But it is also the challenge in these kinds of things is fundamentally, and I started thinking about this, maybe because and I'll say this in this panel also, because you've talked about biases or any of these things. So there was this article that really bothered me, which was women and the vision thing. This came from Harvard, which said, for many women, I mean, often a lot of times they found in the study that people are, they get rated well on other things, but they're not seen as having vision or having vision. So so that kind of bothers me. But what I feel is that it's very intrinsic to innovation, that when you're trying to do something that's a bit more radical, then intrinsically there is a challenge between what you call exploitation of new existing ideas versus exploration of new ideas. If you spend too much time exploiting old ideas, then you don't get the new ideas, and you don't actually, you start to get even your products and everything, we live in an industry that's moving so fast, you get out of, pretty much out of date. But at the same time, if you explore too much, you don't have enough time to stabilize and actually take it somewhere. So there's a balance between them. And so what happens is, when you are an innovator, and this is what, I often used to worry when I came up with these ideas, as you're saying, sometimes somebody would react and say, okay, this is not going to work. This will never be published. Is this really any value? Yeah, this area is so small now. There's so, such a small gap here, right? So that's the kind of thing. And these are valid questions, right? And also, so I think this happens because innovation is one, it is means that you're doing something that's uncertain. You don't know what the outcome is. Nobody knows. So it's a leap of faith, and it's a judgment call. The second thing is when you're explaining your ideas, and I realize that when I know something very well, it's much easier and clearer to explain. When I have these things, ideas, and there's so many missing gaps in it, it's just difficult to explain. It's unclear. It's unclear to me. How in the world do I make it clear to somebody else? And it is innovation because it is unconventional, right? I mean, that's what is new. It means you're challenging the status quo in some way, right? In some minor way. And so, it goes back to this, George Bernard Shaw example, quote, which was like he said, the reasonable man adapts, adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man tries to adapt the world to himself. Hence, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. So the unreasonable women adapts themselves. The reasonable women adapt themselves to the world. The unreasonable women try to adapt the world to their thoughts. And progress depends on being unreasonable. But it's hard to be unreasonable, and so that's kind of where it's very natural to expect that pushback. And I think that needs some combination of humility, but also a quiet determination, right? To say, okay, these are the barriers, this is the feedback. Let me keep keep trying to address it, keep persisting with it. And what I found is that after you persist on it and then you crack something and then that becomes successful, then you get a lot of support. So it's that bridge, that's kind of needed there.
Yeah, that is very true. People would like to see, even if it's a small prototype or a small POC, when they see it working, they start believing in the idea. And then the investment, the support, all the collaborations, they just fall in place. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Suparna. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. Suparna, let's move on to the next topic, where it is about the technologist in mid-career.
Okay.
So most of the engineers, right? Most of the women engineers, most of the women start as engineers the moment they're out of college. But then by the time they are in the mid-career, right, they shift into management roles. Not all, but then few of them start considering management roles. It could be because of various reasons where management could be their forte and they really love doing it. At the same time, I would like to ask you for an advice, wherein you would have definitely been asked, do you want to switch to management again, number of times in your career? What advice would you give to our audience to stay tech focused?
If they want to, exactly, right?
If they want to, yeah, absolutely.
If they want to.
If they want to.
So for me, it was easy, right? I didn't think I would be a good manager, right? So it was easy. So, technology was like, breathing, living, it's like, breathing for me. So, I could not imagine not being, not being a technologist. And I didn't think I had as much of a strength as a manager, and had seen really good managers, right? So I know that, what, strength of being, and so I didn't want to be a bad manager. I wanted to be a great technologist. And so, that's, for me, that choice was relatively easier. I think for many people, they actually have both skills, right? And sometimes it is probably okay in those cases to try both, like you did, Lakshmi. So you may have both of these abilities, and then it's good, to for the system, for everybody to benefit from both of these abilities. I've seen many senior technologists who actually have switched back and forth. And I've seen people who are like pure managers all through the career. I've seen pure technologists. So it can be, it's a balance, is really very personal. It may depend and it may change from time to time as people are in their careers. But maybe the question that you are asking is, okay, sometimes, even though you want to be a technologist, and that was of course true for me in the early part of my career, that even though I wanted to be, the opportunities were not there that much, in India. At least that was the organizational wisdom at that time. That so that's why I was going on the natural trajectory of trying to grow in that path, and then I realized that I just wanted to give this a try. And I went to my manager and said, I really want to try being on the technical path. But only thing I asked for is that if there are any trainings like, executive support or any of those development trainings, don't leave me out of it, because I will need those skills as well. But I took that. And for the period of time, I would say, many cases like this, or, when I tried to do the PhD, because that was also a juncture when I was getting feedback, Suparna, you've done enough technical. And I felt I can never do enough technically. There's so much more to do. There's so much more to learn. So yeah, I took that trajectory and said, okay, I see a huge gap still in where, I know the standards that, the higher standards that exist. Am I there? And I don't think I'm there. So every time you take this, I feel that there is a possible dip that would happen in your career trajectory, because now you have to build out. My manager, for example, said that, okay, now you have to figure out, right? So, it's really possible. Anybody can take any path, but it will be to you to figure out that path. And I found that seeking help really helps. So if I wanted to be in a given area, and we are, especially if you're working in global companies, or you're working in a global community, there are some people out there who are working in those similar areas. For me, the Linux community was that wavelength, right? Like-minded wavelength of people that I could take tips from. There were many senior technologists elsewhere in the organization. Yes, we didn't have that much in India, but they were worldwide. So I think their help and their support, their encouragement, the management support, I think all of those things helped. But it also needed that, willingness to take a little bit of risk, take that, and tell myself, I know why I'm doing this, because this is the thing that brings me joy, makes me happy. So I think it's for everybody, it's that that magic, unique balance that that you can bring. Does that answer, Lakshmi?
Yeah, it does. See, what I really liked in what you said, beside other points, is that letting you not get excluded in some of the trainings, which will help you to make progression better, especially when you're driving initiatives which are like cross team collaborations. You will have to have a lot of negotiation skills. You'll have to have your communication very clear. You'll have to get to the people on why is it important to solve that particular problem in case they are not on the same page. So all these skills and development, these are other things, right? The metadata along with other soft skills, they're also quite important for any technical leader to be successful. Yeah.
So what do
thanks.
you feel, Lakshmi? I mean, as you do you miss technology as you move to a senior management role?
I would say that I'm lucky that I don't miss it because it is still with me. And the team, what I drive currently, it has all pieces of technology, Suparna. The very adjacent to the one which I had built my expertise on, which was Kubernetes. So we also have SaaS, we do open source, we also do some on-premises products. And one thing is, as you said, right, still engineer at heart. So I get involved into some of the design discussions, some of the code reviews, and getting into the customer calls where we really try to debug the issue, why it is happening. So I would just still say that it is a designation by manager, but then I keep doing it. But most of my colleagues, they say initially you'll be able to do it, but then eventually once you, after a couple of years, you may not be able to do the same because you'll have to scale out and you'll have to focus on something else. But I still think I want to spend majority of my time in also technology, maybe 60% and 40% of it to the level of my satisfaction. Otherwise, end of day, you feel that, okay, what did I add to my resume, my personal learning, right? You should be able to write that 2 lines at least once in every week. On Saturday, you should be able to write what are the 2 lines that you have learned the entire week. Yeah.
So what I noticed in research, for example, people are very technical and managers. I mean, so that's what, I was the same question, right? It keeps coming, right? Do you want to be a manager? Because in research, people are actually both doing, managers are actually deep technologists and actually continue to be very hands-on in that career. When I took the transition, I had, one of the reasons I did that was I was at the phase in the project where, as you say, I was getting into that path of becoming more project management and slowly in that direction. But I knew that there was a very complex, difficult architecture piece that had to be done. And I knew I could do that, right? But it would have been very difficult for me at that point of time because it's a tough problem which I don't know myself how to solve, for anybody else to do that. So that kind of was my trigger at that point of time that I thought, okay, I need to spend a lot of time on that. So it's the balance. And I think I see people who walk that balance in their different directions. For me, it's like you. If I don't code, just if I'm feeling a little bit down, right? I'm too many meetings, too many discussions. If I get a few, hours sitting with code, because in a senior technologies load, you also have that same issue that, you still have to broaden out. I feel very happy, I debugged a piece of code today. Did we lose Lakshmi? Or Lakshmi, can you hear us?
Yeah. I had a power outage, so I'm switching to another place. But I could hear most parts. Yeah, I'm back. It's unexpected power cut.
But you recovered very quickly.
Failover path is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Aparna, from here, the next topic on our list, this is about mentoring. So most often we see when we are hiring for very senior positions, right? We don't have so many women candidates even applying for the role. So the pipeline kinds of, I mean, from the colleges when they come out, we see about maybe 30% or 20% of the total strength of the college would have women. But then over a period of time, you don't see the representation of the 30% or 10%, even at the maybe at the VP level also. Not at the C-suite level, even at VP level also, you don't see so much of representation. So it is our time to change that. We will have to make sure that we have a consistent pipeline, and then it keeps going. Sometimes you'll have to pick few people, mentor them, nurture them so that they pick up the right skills which are required for them to be successful and move forward as technologists or as leaders. So what is I know you do a lot of things in your career. You mentor a lot of folks. So what would be your tips on for people like me or people in the audience? How do we seek such opportunities?
So I think, as you said, there is this, this is kind of sad, right? That we have, as you're saying, the pipeline as it goes upwards. No matter what we say, right? It's not easy to pin down any one specific cause, but the numbers kind of speak for themselves, right? That people are not being able to take up that role, or probably not getting the opportunities. Something is missing, and I think it's different things at different points in one's life and career. Uh, the passion for technology that people start with is huge, and I think early career, a lot of things also you get is in a very objective sense. What you're coding, what you're doing, and the outcome of that is very objective. As you go higher, it's a little bit trickier, and so that balance always becomes difficult for people. uh, but I think, it goes both ways. I feel like the organizations, as we need to do a lot more. It's not just enough to give tips to a lot of the women professionals, because these are these real struggles that people have. So how to help people have that balance? So I think one of them is, of course, to say that, if you is if you're passionate about something, and somebody, to be able to actually encourage that and find pathways, like you said, to even if you have resistance, or even if you have these situations, then still, keep innovating. So one of the things I often feel is that women who want, or anybody who wants to grow in a technical career, many people have had this problem that when you try to provide, put together the package, or say what impact that they had. I know I talked about switching some areas, but you also need to be in one area for a good amount of time to have that impact. So then your contributions add up over the year, and so then you have a little more lasting impact, and then you can say, very strongly, this is the thing that this person did, and this is the thing that they helped with, this is the innovations that resulted in, and this is the business outcome it resulted in. So I think one of the things I would say is to have that meaty opportunity that is also for a period of stretch, for a period of time, not switching person around. Sometimes a very talented person, we might switch them around because they are good at many things, but then you want to think about that aspect. Another aspect, I think, is through these transitions in life, and when people might want to give people its opportunities. It's not just opportunities to do more, it's sometimes opportunities to say that, okay, I need some time for myself, but that doesn't mean I want to compromise on the quality of my contributions. So can we have options for people to, yes, sometimes take a break, sabbatical? Sometimes I have done that. I've taken, for writing the book, I took a sabbatical from HPE. When I was doing my PhD, I took a kind of a sabbatical from IBM. So I got those opportunities to take that kind of a break. And sometimes I have had personal situations in my life when I have had to take take time and just focus on my family. So having those avenues that people can do that. And sometimes when people are taking that, this is a sensitive problem, but let me bring this up because I've heard many people, share this with me, saying that, when they're in that situation, many of the companies, even HP, for example, has policies for giving you like 6 months, a pretty large, a good amount of time compared to what it was of a break, when you have a child. But there may be other situations, or maybe over a period of time, when people want to contribute in a part-time basis. Maybe you still want to stay in touch with technology, you want to contribute. Now, how do we evaluate these part-time contributions compared to somebody who is working full-time? I don't think we are able to, it's a hard problem for us to solve. A little bit of this I faced during the PhD that I was doing, because I was also thinking maybe I need a lot of focus for my PhD, but maybe I could spend some time part-time. And that's when I realized, talking to a lot of people, what the challenges were. But really, we should have some avenues. Maybe that's a good time when you want to do part-time. Maybe that's a good time to, I know somebody, a colleague of mine, who did a lot of patents at that time, right? Because, you can focus on longer range things. Maybe don't focus on immediate deliverables, focus on longer range innovations, get a lot of patents, get a lot of those kinds of work that time. So maybe if we could carve out assignments that are really well suited for that kind of part-time contribution. And otherwise it's very demoralizing for somebody when you get a rating that somebody who's a really top performer, and then they go through the stage and their only constraint is really the time, Sarah Sharp actually said this very wonderfully, this time for deep hack time, right, that you need to be a good technologist. That is precious, right? That is a luxury for some people at some stages of their life. So whatever you get, maybe you still want to be rated high on that, right? You should be in that path and not have that situation where you feel that maybe, because of the comparison being made, because of the job responsibility kind of being compared at that part, but not having that specialized path or route. Then it starts to demoralize people, and then you start to step back, and then you start to say, okay, really, can I succeed in a technical role? Can I really keep up with all of this, right? So we need to be able to find ways to stop, stop that leakage at those points of time. Also, I think in general, as you say, in terms of mentoring and all, another thing that I have found, and I face this myself also, that many of us, speaking up for ourselves is hard, right? We like, and that's kind of the, if there's nothing good or bad about it, but having some other people speak up for you, having some other people give those opportunities, challenge you, and then then you get a chance to prove that makes such a huge difference, right? So those are some of the things which I think I can probably go on with a lot of things, but these are a few.
So you're bringing in a sponsor here who's going to talk for you, like a sponsor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was saying that you are from mentoring, you moved into sponsorship, where somebody is going to talk for you, tell you that these are the avenues that they want you to look at, which are quite challenging, and give you some areas wherein you can actually show your potential. Because most often getting the right opportunity to prove your potential is also rare. So when the opportunity comes, we should have the right equipment. And I also agree with you wherein when we have the time boxed time, right? Say, for example, like doing PhD, you'll have to spend a lot of time reading and focusing on your education. But then I was glad to hear that you could do both. You would also spend some few hours on the technology. But as in organizations, we don't have the mature tools and processes that could rate a person on their contributions rather than the time which they spend on the project or something. Because not every time, the time what you spend is directly proportionate to the productivity what you earn, or how much needle you are moving it. It doesn't correlate at all. So it is an organization's maturity over a period of time. I hope that most organizations support sabbatical leaves or give a part-time kind of leaves for every engineer, not just for any particular group or something, so that they can make progress in their careers. Because especially at the mid-career, Suparna, I personally felt that I needed more and more avenues to learn, to focus on, to understand. Not everything we want to be an expert at. As you said, right, you'll have to be good at one, and then you'll have to have a broader perspective of things, like a team. And you'll have to build your expertise at least on one or two areas, which are adjacent fields. I felt, and then, so that is where, for me, what helped was being part of this Women Who Code community, Women in Tech. And then some of these groups, right, wherein I see that very enthusiastic people are there. It's like when you become part of the tribe, it becomes a habit for you. because somebody else, your peer or your friend say that, hey, that session is happening, do you want to come? And then the buddy partnership works really well. And then you keep going and then you keep learning. And that 1% consistency rule, it really makes 30% of impact over a year, right? So that is when making small changes, being consistent on some things and not leaving your foot from the pedal just because you're busy with few things, I think will have a greater impact. Yeah, we need organization support. We need support from women leaders, technologists, not just women. Again, I think when we ask for help, people are there to support. They just need to see the real urge and the initiative from us to take it forward.
So that's one thing that I noticed, that for me, that was what worked, that when I expressed that I was interested in something, I often found that I got that opportunity. And then after that, of course, there is a challenge in how you do that, but that time people start to support you, or as you start to contribute, that passion kind of works out. And the community aspect is very important. So that's why I, despite the busy schedule, I find that being involved with professional organizations, being, some of these, even these external forums like this, or even communities within the organization, the Linux kernel community was one example. These are things which, are really good resources available to each of us, because sometimes when we get into what I call this a local minimum in our career, right, sometimes we don't know where do we move, right? We are stuck in, but it's a local minimum because it's really, there is the optimum position is there, but it's there globally, but I don't have the perspective, right? But that view comes from the people that you interact with, and you get those ideas, you get those pathways. So I think that's maybe making that that little bit of extra time to connect. I find that it pays back a lot.
Yeah, the networking time what you spend, yeah, definitely. And yeah, coming to the break the bias, so the theme, how it relates to you?
So I started thinking of bias in a different way after I was working on AI. Right? So, bias is such a sensitive topic, right? Because nobody wants to be biased. And it's we say unconscious bias. But then looking at how AI algorithms, or how the output of AI becomes biased, I get a lot of clarity, and this is the system, right? This is basically, there's two things. One is, or maybe I can say three aspects. One of the aspects is the data that you're getting. If your data is biased, maybe it represents a biased world, or it's not representative enough. Then the models, will learn biased outcomes, and we are no different, right? So how do you counter that? The more counter examples you have, the more better examples that you have that will enrich that data, and by giving more people opportunities and helping that, right, succeed, then that'll kind of naturally start to counter some of those biases. The second kind is the algorithmic bias. So even if, and there's this interesting studies showing that bias amplification can actually occur in the models. And so this is a situation where the algorithm or the model ends up fixating on something which is not really significant, which is not the real criteria that should be used. And that can just happen accidentally, statistically. So it's a filter by which you look at it. And so tackling that requires, so how do you tackle that? You need different perspectives. So you need to have maybe different kinds of models, tried out. So like this, the feedback from different perspectives helps us really narrow down that there is a problem. This is not consistent. Or maybe you have use explanation, and what do you call in AI? We have, say, explainable AI is a problem, right? How do you interpret, why did I make this decision? And if you're able to go back to that, then that exposes some of that. The third kind of one is probably the hard one, right? Which is how you frame the problem in the first place. Sometimes in the case of AI, for example, do I frame, I sometimes use proxy variables instead of the actual variable to measure something. So maybe I want to know, how sick somebody is, and I'm looking at the medical bills, but maybe if they're in an economically poor section, their medical bills is not going to be the right indicator of that, right? And there's so many other such indications, right? Errors versus crimes, right? You're looking at errors, but that's maybe disadvantaging a certain group. The same thing here, I remember this. This was very early in my career. I had this level of, if I say, naive indignation that, whenever somebody says, okay, let's look for diversity and hire for diversity, and I used to feel, okay, we want to be known in terms of our merit. So I said, it's always this, if everything should be based on merit, right? So what's the problem with that? So in one roundtable with that MD, with MD Ravi Marva in the room, in that discussion, I was usually quiet, but somehow I just couldn't hold myself, and I just said it should be based on merit. And he turned to me and said, Suparna, you're absolutely right. It should be based on merit. But the problem lies with the way we define merit, especially when it comes to leadership roles. I didn't understand that at that point of time, but that's the other place of potential bias in terms of how we frame the problem. What are you really looking for when you say leadership? Oftentimes we look for, this is again one favorite of mine, oftentimes we look for confidence, right? But I feel like what is more important is courage. Courage is doing things even when you're not confident, because you know it's important. So why do we look for confidence with, the feeling that, I know I can succeed, I can do that? Many times you're not in that situation. So why use the criteria, looking at somebody, do they sound confident or not, as opposed to observing, are they having the courage to go and try something, and are they making something possible that was not possible before? Are they helping others make something possible that was not possible before? Maybe for me, that's maybe a better way to frame the problem, or frame, what is leadership. So that's it.
That's really nice. You're very right. I mean, we will be confident only when we have at least some control information, or when we know that we have the right data. But courage need not depend on any facts or anything associated with the entity itself, but then the trying out with no fear. Very well said, Suparna, about it. So in the interest of time, I still had some questions to ask, but I just didn't realize how time just flew. So I think
So
yeah,
what about
Jaya
you,
is there.
Lakshmi? Share a little bit about, have you faced this, or any time in your career, is there something that
bias as in actually for me, the first problem that comes is inclusive language, which I often find it missing. The meeting starts with "Hi guys," so when I'll be like, from that time I'm like cut out from that meeting. I'm like, I'm not there in this room. So many times I tell leaders that use words like "hi folks" or "hi team" or "hi all," "hi everyone," instead of saying "hi guys." And so that is one. And most often the user persona, which we refer to even our customer presentation, they're referred as he. That is one. And the second thing is, sometimes in a global positioning, right, there will be some biases unknowingly, that they think that for a woman, when they give some challenging projects, they think of so many other things which we ourselves wouldn't think for ourselves. So that's very strange. And then you realize when you talk to the person, like, you could have given me that project. What made you just subtract me from it? And then they would say, oh, you have a kid, you have a family. I'm like, did I ever say that is an impediment for me to make progress? So the assumptions which come with people's perceptions, they're very strong and they kind of impact. So that's when that's another bias I see. So I make sure that I talk to people on one-on-one and tell them that I'm open for opportunities. I don't want to refrain myself. So it's an overhead for me to keep telling people that, hey, I'm there. But sometimes by saying that, it is like you'll be over-exercised, because you will get a lot of things on your plate at a time, and then just because you asked it, you have to serve it. So there is a right balance again between these two that we will have to strike. Yeah, so biases in all these forms is what I have seen, but I wouldn't say that I managed to break the bias, but I tried to block it. Block it in the sense that they wouldn't repeat it for another engineer or another employee, or they wouldn't repeat it again for me in any form. I could be successful only at that level. So yeah, breaking the bias, I think it's the next level we all need to push the barrier to. Yeah, and thank you so much, Suparna, for being with us. I know you'll have to run for another meeting. So Jaya, over to you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. And Suparna and Lakshmi, thank you on behalf of the entire Women Who Code team here for taking your time out, in your busy schedule and sharing your experiences. It was very enlightening and insightful, and it will definitely help us magnify the thoughts on what it means of overcoming the bias and how to frame the problems and getting the solution out of it. Especially, I would want to highlight a few things what hit really hard is like hunting problems for the solution. I'm sure people here must have been thrilled to hear your experience on what made you to opt for the PhD, and covering the area on being reasonable or unreasonable. It was truly said, it was really simple and so very true. So and you also called out on how important is it to have balance in innovations. We should not only focus on the failed ideas, and then we may miss out the better ideas. So that was one of the very important thing that caught me here, and how important it is to swim in one area before switching. So often switching also may not be helpful. Thank you for covering that up. And the last but the very important thing, having that courage in doing things when we do not have that confidence. So it was really great session. Thank you for such a wonderful contribution of being part of the session, and it was absolute privilege of having you here. Thank you, Suparna. Thank you, Lakshmi, for
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Suparna, for accepting the invite on a short notice. And then luckily we managed to get this 1 hour slot, and I think we made the best out of it. I hope we connect again in near future through some forum, because I still have some questions to ask you.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for asking all those insightful questions. And I learned
everyone.
from your insights too. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
I'm deeply honored, Suparna. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.